Good day and welcome to Caribbean Connect. I am Kimberly Ramkalawan. We are now joined by Antigua Barbuda Prime Minister Gaston Browne. Welcome and thank you for joining us.
Certainly a pleasure.
Now, this year, there are a lot of topics on the agenda for CARICOM heads gathering at the 43rd regular meeting here in Suriname. Can you give us an idea just how much the CSME takes precedent at this meeting, this year's meeting? Last year, you were the intersessional chairman and you called for a shift in gears, especially after the recovery of COVID-19. Tell me what changes have been made so far and what we can expect.
Well, the CSME will always be a critical issue. I want to make sure that we achieve not only a common market, but also a single economy. So it remains an aspiration, at least a single economy. But we have made a significant amount of progress in terms of functional cooperation. The last 2 years, for example, involving COVID, we would have seen a lot of collaboration among CARICOM states, and I believe that collaboration at the regional level would have helped to contain COVID and at the same time to assist us with the management of COVID, to acquire vaccines, to acquire PPEs, and the CSME remains work in progress. But I'm sure you would accept that there's some pressing needs at this time. There's a issue of escalating prices, especially food and fuel prices. We also have the existential threat of climate change that we have to continue to grapple with. And even the issue of de-risking has been an issue affecting the region for several years now. So these are issues that continue to grab our attention. But again, we are seeing some improvement in terms of functional cooperation. One of the recent issues affecting the region is the issue of transportation, air transportation, as a result of the devastating impact of COVID on our airlines, including LAAT, which is currently in administration. So I think that we have made progress. There's no doubt about it. There's some who may argue that the region is not advancing as fast as it should. But we have to remain thankful for the gains that we've made so far and to put the necessary systems in place in order to accelerate the progression to that single economy, which is the ultimate aspiration for the region, unless maybe sometime in the future we get to a political union.
Now, these are the four main areas that you have listed up for discussion. Tell me some of the areas specifically that you would like seen with particular interest for Antigua and Barbuda, and where you see it lending support regionally.
There's several other issues that on the agenda. I mean, for example, we held a meeting just now with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as we seek to strengthen the ties between CARICOM and Saudi Arabia as one of the G20 countries and a country that should be able to help us to build capacity in many areas. And in addition to the recent Summit of the Americas, that is also on the agenda as we seek to come up with a framework in order to set the terms of reference to engage the United States so that we can come up with a, let's say, sustaining plan, one in which the U.S. will engage the Caribbean in a more meaningful way. And I would have mentioned before the whole issue of the escalation in petroleum prices. We will be pushing for there to be some relaxation of the sanctions against Venezuela so that countries in the Caribbean can access Venezuelan petroleum products at a discount in order to reduce the impact of cost of living on the people of the region. But Antigua and Barbuda has been at the forefront of CARICOM integration. And we continue to play our part in terms of keeping the region united and contributing to the various debates. In fact, we have been at the forefront against the issue of climate change, pushing the larger countries to reduce their emissions and at the same time to make technologies available to remove carbon from the Earth's atmosphere. And also, we have been fighting for more developmental funding for the region because that is one of the areas affecting our development. In fact, they have utilized these artificial impediments to deprive countries in the Caribbean, the Pacific and Indian Oceans from much needed developmental assistance. So we continue to push for there to be some recalibration of the GNI that they have continued to use and to create a multidimensional vulnerability index. In fact, Antigua and Barbuda is currently serving on a technical committee at the level of the United Nations, which is designed to uh, come up with a multidimensional vulnerability index that will complement the GNI and to ensure that there is greater inclusion, that there is greater equity in the allocation of concessional financing. That committee is actually chaired by former Prime Minister of Norway, Ernest Solberg, and I'm actually the co-chair. So we've been doing a significant amount of work, and we believe that by the end of this year, we would have successfully put together a vulnerability index that would look at not only the vulnerability of these countries, but also the lack of resilience. Because when you look at the GNI criterion, it, in essence, excludes, I'd say, some of the most vulnerable and least resilient countries in the world. So we're not only looking at vulnerability, but also the issue of resilience, and to ensure that we have a more equitable and more inclusive metric going forward in terms of qualifying countries for developmental assistance. Uh, in terms of our other engagements in international fora, Antigua and Barbuda continues to collaborate with the various sister countries in CARICOM to make sure that our interest is protected and promoted. And I would say that, generally speaking, CARICOM's advocacy has been heightened within the last, I would say, at least 2, 3 years, within the international financial institutions, within the IMF and the World Bank. We continue to advocate for new instruments. We continue to advocate for debt suspension, for debt write-offs. So, we have been very active as a member state of CARICOM, and that will continue because, as I said, traditionally our country has been at the forefront of this integration movement and has always been a very active member, especially when it comes to advocacy and fighting to not only to protect but to promote the best interests of the Caribbean people.
Now, you touch on air transport, and you also hold the position as chair at CARICOM over financial services, the Financial Services Committee. Now, there has been talk in recent weeks of the inter-island ferry and possible routes, and in recent weeks, we've even seen a budget approval in Barbados. But there's still some time for this to be implemented. Can you guide as to this will also be part of the CSME discussion? And also, there's also the need for cargo being cargo-centric, where we're no longer waiting for a container to be filled, but making it cheaper for goods. Do you see this in reality being materialized in this nearest time?
It's critical that we resolve the issues of connectivity of both maritime and air transportation. You can't sustain an integration movement if you can't move goods and people effectively. And that has been a major problem within the integration movement since its inception. So it is one of the areas of discussion that will take place during this conference. And we're hoping that we can come up with a new model for air transportation, one in which we can sustain air transportation to the extent that we have a model in which member states will contribute. So you have a model of shared burden and shared benefit. In the past, we have seen situations which some countries have been loafers. They benefit from the services, but they do not wish to contribute. You cannot sustain air transportation or even maritime transportation, for that matter, on that type of model in which some pay and others don't. And when you look at the issue of both maritime and air transportation, they cannot be sustained by any single member state. So it requires a collective effort and it requires collective burden. And in as much as Barbados has indicated that they have done some work in it, clearly they will need to broaden it to include all of CARICOM and to provide a type of maritime transportation mechanism in which we can move goods and even people throughout the region. So, I mean, South America, for example, Guyana and Suriname and even Brazil, on the border of Guyana, they have this area Lefem that produces a lot of food. And from the research, we can import foods from Guyana, from Suriname, and even Brazil for that matter, that will be far cheaper than the foods that we are importing from North America. So, in terms of keeping the price of food down, it is important that we establish maritime transportation and reliable and sustainable maritime transportation as soon as possible. But in terms of the type of assets, I think that we need combo assets. So, take for instance, in terms of the air transportation, we need aircraft that can carry people and also carry products. And similarly, with the maritime transportation, it should be a vessel that can carry people and to carry products. So that you don't have to rely exclusively on carrying individuals, but at the same time, you have a combination of both. And by so doing, we're able to move people and to move goods more effectively within the region and certainly to sustain our integration movement. And I think it is a critical aspect of sustaining our integration movement. I would say that within recent times, there has been heightened discussions and greater commitment coming from the leaders. In fact, President Ali in Guyana, he would have developed an agri plan, as you know, in which we're trying to reduce our import bill by about 25% by 2025. And I'm pretty sure that the opportunities that will be created for Suriname and Guyana in particular will be enormous. You have a lot of land, you have a lot of fresh water, and there's no reason why you can't produce more food and to supply the rest of the Caribbean. I mean, we should not be relying almost exclusively on imports from North America when we have countries within integration movement that can supply us, that have these inherent advantages in which they can produce food cheaper. And I'll give you a case in point, for example. A pound of watermelon in Antigua and Barbuda is about, I'd say, $1.50 US. We can import watermelon from Guyana for probably about 40 cents. And if you add 10% transportation, even 20%, 30%, even 100%, by the time it gets to Antigua, it will be significantly cheaper. So we need to unlock those opportunities or the potential of these countries to supply the rest of the Caribbean. And the only how it will be achieved is if we establish reliable and sustainable air and sea transportation. And again, it requires an all of CARICOM effort in which all the countries come together and subsidize these assets, both A and C assets, because generally speaking, because of the small population size, you'll find that especially for an airline, it is difficult to turn a profit, so it will require some level of subsidy. But when you look at the economic gains and even the social gains, it's public good to have reliable regional transportation, and therefore the countries of the region should not hesitate to provide whatever subsidy that is necessary.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Gaston Browne, for joining us, sharing some important points that will be discussed at this year's 43rd regular meeting of CARICOM heads of government and what impacts his country, some critical points, air transport, and what is needed for an integrated region. Thanks for joining us.
Plus, we have to take into consideration too that, we're not only linked by our geography, but also by our families that are scattered right through the Caribbean archipelago, right down to Suriname, Guyana. And our people need to move. You don't want to have a situation in which they can't move effectively because transportation costs are prohibitive. Recently I tried to book a flight through Miami to get here, and they quoted me, that is American Airlines, $22,000. That's EC dollars. So that's about 8,500 US dollars. So we also have to look from the standpoint of the foreign exchange leakages and the fact too that you may find that if we have to depend on extra regional carriers to get us within the Caribbean to go north and to come south, then the cost of transportation will become prohibitive, and now people would not be able to move. Even the requirement for a visa, for example, if you have to go to North America to come back to the Caribbean region, many people would not be able to move because they don't have a visa. So there are all sorts of social and economic implications that necessitate urgent action to get transportation within the region right, both maritime and air transportation.
Thank you once again for reiterating those important points. We wish you all the best in this week's sessions.
Thank you.
Take
Cheers.
care. Thanks for watching Caribbean Connect.
Dime Network, your business channel.